birthday of Dora and Shanna Priever.
So tonight, I'm very grateful that we have this opportunity to tell us more about our speaker. I welcome to the Bima a very talented musician, an important leader and part of our community here at Bethel and throughout the Huntington community. And as well tonight, I mentioned he is the son of our speaker. So to introduce our speaker tonight, I welcome Fishman.
Thank you, friends and family. I feel blessed. I think we're all blessed. Blessed that my mom does. And can share in what is a truly amazing journey that she's gone through. She never really talked about it when we grew up. It was really something that was maybe a way of protecting us from what really occurred in her life. But her strength, her poise, the way that she delivers this message today is awesome. I'm really, really pleased to be able to bring up none other than my mother, Rosette, Priever, Fishman, Gerbosi.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for inviting me back again. It's a pleasure to be back on Long Island. My name is Rosette, née Priever, Fishman, Gerbosi. During the Holocaust, I was an infant child. I was born in Paris, France. My parents, Dora and Shanna, were young Polish immigrants who came to Paris to seek a better life. My mother was the youngest of 3 girls. They lived very poorly, received no education whatsoever. Only the boys were sent to school. So the girls had to find work at a very young age to help support the family. Since they could not read or write, they had to find some sort of menial work. My mother became a cook for a wealthy family. Her older sister learned dressmaking, went to Paris to apprentice in some famous couture houses, and in fact she worked for Coco Chanel. And she eventually became quite successful in her trade. She opened up her own business, sent for my mother, and got her a job as a cook. My father, the youngest of 5 boys, came to Paris with 2 of his brothers. The other 2 emigrated to Chile, where we still have quite an extensive Priever family. My 2 uncles in Paris were tailors, and my father learned the fur business. He and my mother were introduced by a mutual family friend. It was love at first sight, so I heard, and they were married shortly after. My brother Bernard was born following me. My mother helped my father in his fur business, which they started in their small, modest little apartment. My father would cut the fur pieces, and my mother would operate the machine that put them together to make fur coats. They worked diligently, side by side. Even after my brother was born, they were so determined to succeed. 8 years later, my uncle's wife gave birth to beautiful, identical baby girls. Well, my mother must have been very envious, because lo and behold, I was born 10 months later. From the moment I was born, my mother called me her motherkind. Well, I think everybody here knows what mazel means. Where I live in Naples, I have to explain it. Not a lot of people know what it means, especially groups of young children who don't know the meaning. But Since Mazel in Yiddish means good luck, her intuition told her that as long as she had me close, no harm would ever come to her or to the family, and that I would bring good fortune to all. She kept telling me that, and made me feel so special. Surely enough, after my birth, they became quite prosperous. My father's business grew tremendously. He was able to acquire a large factory, more help, more machinery. They were able to move into a brand new large apartment and furnished it luxuriously. It was in the Mount Essex of Paris, if you know Paris, the quatrième, the fourth arrondissement, which was a predominantly Jewish neighborhood. I can still visualize the beautiful, highly polished oak floors, the dark modern furniture, the newly built bathroom, the paintings. It was all exquisite. I still remember pushing my little dog carriage around and around the large dining room table. My mother was an immaculate housekeeper. She would not let anyone in her house until they put on special slippers that she kept at the door. She was an elegant woman, always well dressed and made up. I can still smell her beautiful fragrance. A gourmet cook, proficient in both French and Jewish cuisine, she entertained the whole family for all holiday dinners. It was considered to be a very big treat to be invited to our home for dinner. She took her cooking very seriously. One day I came home from school, went into the bathroom, and found a large fish swimming in our bathtub. When I asked her why there was a fish swimming in the tub, she replied, "I don't trust the dead fish, and I have to make a filter fish for Passover, and I want to make sure that it's fresh." My father, besides being a very smart businessman, was also a skier, rode a motorcycle, loved the outdoors and animals, and had a fantastic musical talent. We always had a piano at home, which he played beautifully, as well as a harmonica. He could not read a note of music. It was strictly by ear. But could he make beautiful music? He entertained us for hours. Well, two of my children luckily inherited his musical genes, and my oldest son was a professional guitarist for quite a few years. And of course, did I brag about Robert? He also has entertained this temple for quite a few years with his music, and entertained us at home as well. My daughter rides a Harley. She's a daredevil. Keeps a picture of her grandfather with us on his motorcycle and carrying his skis on his back in her office. He's her idol. I had a charmed life as a little girl in those days. You heard of the expression "la vie en rose." Well, that's what it was. My mother made sure that I had the proper education and college which she did not receive as a child, so that by the time I was 9 years old, I was immersed in schoolwork, as well as piano, ballet, and even some English lessons. The latter being a symbol of extreme class refinement, according to my mother. My twin cousin and I were very close. I recall my father making us identical fur coats, and I am sewing identical dresses for the three of us. We would strut around the park in the neighborhood with people pointing at us and yelling, "Look at the triplets," which was quite a novelty in those days. Well, we of course would laugh to ourselves, but did not deny it. My best friend and schoolmate was named Beth, another Jewish girl. We had a lot in common. We were both quiet, studious girls who loved to play with our dolls. I remember that she had a huge blackboard in her room, and we used to take turns playing teacher and student, and also doing our homework together. I also had a few Catholic friends who invited me to their communions, and that was quite a treat. And I was very impressed by the pageantry of the Catholic Church and how beautiful my friends looked in their beautiful white gowns. At this point, I just want to bring you a little bit up to the present because this anecdote is related to what I'm going to say. When I came here 2 days ago, my son told me that he had some items that I had left with them before I went to Florida 20 some odd years ago. And among these items were a few notebooks from the lycée that I had attended in the year of 1945, 1946. I happened to thumb through one of the composition notebooks, and I found that I took out this page, which tells a story which I'm about to relate in great detail, and I'm going to relate it. But it was funny to see that this was the story that I wrote. I'm talking about summer vacations. Well, the story, actually, the title of the story was, it's in French, of course I have to translate it, to relate a very, very agreeable, pleasant surprise that happened in the early childhood. Well, I'm going to talk about that now, because the summer vacations were glorious. My parents would send my brother and me to stay with farmers in the countryside, and this we're talking about pre-Priever era, for about a month, and then they would join us for another 2 weeks. We always looked forward to their visits, as we had so much fun as a family. And one particular summer, I was about 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, I don't quite remember. It was the night of my birthday. I missed my mother so much that I was crying for her. In the middle of the night, I felt something cool next to my cheek. Obviously something that somebody had placed there. When I woke up in the morning, I found the most beautiful porcelain doll that I had ever seen. And according to this paper, it had beautiful round rosy cheeks, ruby red lips, and beautiful brown eyes. And it was a long blue dress, satin dress. And I loved it for that moment on. And then the door opened, and my mother came into the room. I ran to her, hugged to her neck, kissed her all over, and I was so happy to see her because I had missed her so much. When she came in and told me that she only came from Paris to see me, to bring me my doll for my birthday, because she had to go back to Paris because my father was ill, he had asthma, and they were going to go to the mountains for a cure to cheer up his lungs. Of course I was very upset, but being a beautiful child, I accepted what she said. I went back, after she left, I went back to my doll, examined it thoroughly, kissed it all over, and I immediately declared it to be a boy. And I named it by my favorite French names, Robert Michel. Well, my second born son. You often joke about being named after he knows how much that doll meant to me and what a comfort it was during some very difficult times. In the summer of 1940, just after the Germans marched into Paris, instead of going to a farm, the whole family, including aunts, uncles, and cousins, went to Biarritz for a vacation. It's a seaside resort situated on the Atlantic side of France, near the border of Spain. This was the first time that I saw Germans that had arrived in trucks. I had heard about these so-called monsters from my mother because her minister, who had remained in Poland, in Warsaw actually, with her husband and 4 children, had written to us about the terrible conditions in Warsaw. My mother sent packages of food and clothing and received mail for a while. But when the letters stopped coming, we imagined the worst, and we were right. They were later incarcerated in the Warsaw ghetto and never heard from again. These German soldiers in the truck were very young, blonde, blue-eyed, and smiling at us. Not at all what I was led to believe. They were handsome, and about my brother's age. I turned to my mother and said, they didn't look like monsters to me. She replied, oh, these boys are not the ones who fear. They only follow orders. It's their leaders who are ordaining to us. I still could not believe it. At that point, my Uncle Jacob, married to my mother's sister, announced that he was not returning to Paris with us. He was sanctified of the Germans, being Russian, having served in World War I and having witnessed some atrocities. He decided to go over the border to Spain and somehow try to reach the United States. He eventually took a ship in Portugal. He told Marianne to return to Paris, close up her business, leave the country as soon as possible, and try to join him. It was still possible to leave at that time. He tried to persuade my father to do the same. And my father kept insisting that the French government would protect his Jews, that we should not be alarmed. In other words, he did not believe that we were in danger. So we returned to Paris, and soon after that, our beautiful, serene existence started to crumble. Terrible restrictions were imposed on the Jews. First, the Jews were not allowed to go out of their houses before 9 in the morning or after dark in the evening. We were not allowed to go to public places such as restaurants, movies, libraries, museums, or assembling groups. I was heartbroken because I had taken ballet and I wanted to be a ballerina, and I was very serious about my ballet. And I took ballet at the Châtelet, which is a very famous ballet school in Paris, and we were told that no Jewish children were allowed anymore, so I had to stop taking ballet lessons. It also became, Jews were only allowed to shop for food in the afternoon hours, when the markets were just about empty or about to close. It became very difficult to obtain food. My mother, being a very resourceful person, had her connections in the black market. She would go to the shoemaker and count the chicken, or she would crack cleaner for eggs or butter. One day, though, when she came back from daily shopping trip, she burst into tears. She blurted out, "What I could get today was some horse meat." Well, somehow, being the fantastic cook that she was, she made it taste good. The greatest humiliation, though, was to be compelled to wear the infamous yellow Jewish Star of David with the word Juif, which means Jew in French, printed across it, and which had to be sewn on every garment. Children from the age of 6 had to wear it. On the first day that I and other Jewish classmates came to school wearing the star, I remember that the headmistress gathered the whole school together in the yard, pulled us near her, climbed onto the platform, and announced, I don't remember the exact word, but the gist of it was, that any girl who as much as uttered a single insult or derogatory remark towards us regarding this terrible badge that we were forced to wear, that girl would be severely punished. What a great person she was. She could have been in a lot of trouble. Well, this speech was quite effective within the school wall. The girls were kind or were distant, as they were probably warned by their parents not to get too close to the Jewish girls. However, as we left school every day, we had to run as fast as our legs could carry us, because the boys of the neighborhood school came after us, throwing rocks and calling us dirty Jew dog, and other terrible equivalent insults. I would run crying to my house, angry and screaming at my mother. Why do we have to be Jewish? Why do we have to be different? This was my childish reaction to the situation. Remember that I was just a child, and I did not understand fully. I just wanted to be just like the other children. My mother tried to soothe me and explain that this was temporary and that eventually all would be well. I was not quite convinced, and I do believe that neither was she. Around that time, as soon as my parents heard that they were rounding up all the young Jewish boys who sent them to labor camps, they made arrangements for my brother as well as my cousin, both teenagers, to leave Paris. They devised a unique way to get them out of Paris. My uncle, who was a tailor, sewed 2 naval uniforms, since uniformed young men usually did not have to show papers. I remember my mother throwing money into the hands of their pants and jackets. She would have stuck the whole chicken in there if she could have. Well, they got away safely, leaving for parts unknown, which was quite disturbing. But we got word somehow later on, after they were refused entry into Switzerland, that they had hooked up with the French forces of the resistance and were fighting the Nazis. And then the arrests began. Has anybody here read Sarah's Key?
Yes.
And you know what I'm talking about. When I recently read the book, a light bulb went on in my head. It was in July 1942. You know, it's a fictitious story for the true event. It was in July 1942, and the Nazis ordered the arrest of thousands of Jewish men, women, and children who were rounded up. It was called like Bonhof, and kept for days in the Veldiv, which was a large classical arena in Paris. They were held without adequate food or water and terrible sanitary conditions. A lot of people got sick. Finally, they were shipped to concentration camps and never heard from again. I remember that my father told us that we had to leave our apartment because they always came to the residence. And we had to stay in his factory for the weekend. I don't know how he knew to hide us. Perhaps he had some information from some good-hearted policeman. I don't know. But anyway, my father also brought some friends. We had quite a crowd hiding with us. My parents made me feel that we were going to a picnic. My mother passed some delicious food. We slept on blankets, played games to pass the time away, and I was not at all afraid. We went back to our home, but some others were not so lucky. One evening, we heard a commotion in the apartment right below us. An elderly couple lived there. My mother ran down with me following her. There were two policemen telling these people to hurry up. My mother, feisty as can be, turned to the policeman and asked why these people were being arrested, what crime they had committed, and cried out in despair that they were old and diabetic and would not survive more than a week without their medicine. But I remember the policeman turning, becoming very angry. My mother for interfering. He turned to her and said, "Lady, you are not on the list tonight." You know, they were very big with their lists. But if you don't shut your mouth and fend your after her, you and your little girl are coming with us. At this point, there was nothing she could do but retreat back to our home, defeated and very sad. This next one still breaks my heart. I knew a young couple who lived across the street from us, who were very good friends of my parents. They had a baby boy, 1 year old. I loved that baby. I used to play with him all the time. When the police came, the young mother resisted arrest, created quite a scene, and they shot the baby right in front of their eyes. Another arrest which affected us very personally concerned my aunt and uncle, my father's brother whose son had left for my brother. They paid somebody who promised to get them across the border to the free zone, and that person led them right to the Nazis. There were unfortunately many unscrupulous people who preyed on innocent, desperate victims. And there were some who genuinely helped the Jews. You just have to know whom to trust. One day shortly after, as I sat at my desk at school, I noticed that my friend Beth was absent. The teacher burst into tears, and she told us that Beth and her family had been arrested the night before. I was sick with grief. When I got home, my father kept reassuring me that he was safe. I trusted him. I never questioned his authority. He seemed to know everything. He was always such a strong figure. I only found out much later on why my brother told me that, why he was so confident that he was safe for the rest. It seemed that the Gestapo had visited him at his shop and requisitioned his factory to make fur coats for the German army. They were about to fight on the Russian front and needed some warm clothes. He had no choice, of course, but he felt that as long as they needed him, our family would be safe. Shortly after, for some unknown reason, my mother kept me home from school. And it wasn't until years later that I found out why. It seems that the headmistress had contacted her and told her that she had secret advanced information that the Gestapo was coming to school to pick up all the Jewish children. They did it throughout France. It was toward the end of the school year, and I did not go back to school. My parents felt that I should leave Paris for my safety. We had very good Christian friends who lived in our building and who had adopted a little boy. This boy was adopted from their cousin, a poor widow with 6 children, who was a refugee herself from Lorraine, which is right near the German border. She was trying to escape from the Nazi occupation. Her oldest son had joined the RAF in London, and she and the other 4 children had sought refuge in the Rosette area, the free zone of France. This boy, according to the agreement, was to spend every summer with his biological family. My mother begged them to take me along for the summer. This would give her time to try to convince my father to plan an escape. Our friend agreed to take me, but it was going to be very tricky, and we had to plan my departure without arousing suspicion. Neighbors in those days were always watching me, some very anxious to report the Jews who were breaking the law, and thus win points for the Nazis who were at the time powerful winning side. Since we were not allowed to go out after dark, and the train for my departure was in the evening, the plan was for me to pretend that I was mailing a letter at the post office, which was right around the corner from our lane. I often did this in view of the neighbors without wearing the Jewish star, of course, and they didn't pay much attention to me because I always came right out. On that particular evening, I was to mail a letter and then run to the train station, which was a couple of miles away, and that was only 10 years old. Wait for the men in his son who were carrying my suitcase and board the train. This was probably the most painful moment of my life, because I had to say goodbye to my parents, not knowing when or if I would ever see them again. I pleaded with them to come with me. My mother said that she could not leave. I then asked my mother to come with me. She told me that she could not leave my father, but reassured me that they were planning to join me very soon. My mother hugged me for a long time, and then uttered the words that have been with me all my life. She said in half in French, half in Yiddish, "Elle s'en va, my little kind. Elle s'en va, my mother. There was my beloved child. There was my good luck." We boarded the train, and we had one more hurdle to surmount. We had to cross the border into the free zone of France. I don't know if you know that the Vichy government had made a deal with the Nazis, that part of France, toward the south, would remain free of occupation. But eventually the Nazis marched out through, ignoring the pact. At the border, 2 officers came on board, one in French and one in German, and asked to see the men's papers. He had told us to be very, very quiet, and so we obeyed because we knew that this was very dangerous. Since children had no papers, he examined the men's papers, asking who these children were and where we were going. The men answered without hesitation that we were his son and daughter, and that we were going to visit relatives in the south. They looked us up and down for a very long time, as we kept a very straight face, and finally left the cabin. We had looked out. What a courageous man he was. If he had been found out transporting a Jewish child across the border, he would have been arrested on the spot, or worse. We arrived in Kigu, in a Dordon, a quaint little village, in a rural community with a real castle at the top of the hill. It was all then in ruins, but it still had a dungeon, which was quite a playland for all the children of the village. The family lived on the main street in a storefront which consisted of one large room, kitchen, and bathroom. There was an outhouse, or a shack with a hole in the ground, which was a far cry from the luxurious bathroom we had in Paris. The conditions were very primitive. We had to wash in the kitchen, which we did not do too often. The girls had the front room, and Madame slept in the back room with her two sons. She was a calmly looking lady, dressed in black as she was still in mourning, and had commercial gray hair which she wore in a bun. She was very sad, and she did smile a lot at her little boy when it come after her. There were two older girls who were very friendly to me, just one teenage boy, and a beautiful red-headed girl of my age, who had quite an attitude when she saw me. She probably resented me for taking up much of the attention. We never really got close. We tolerated each other. Things fed me well. I never went hungry. I was never too clean, but never wanting for food. I still remember the wonderful rabbit stew that Madame made. We ate a lot of rabbits, but it was cheap and readily available. They immediately took me to the church, where the priest told me how welcome I was. He declared himself to be my protector, told me that I could sing in the choir, and to pick out a saint for whom I would bring flowers. Well, what does a little Jewish girl know about saints? I picked Joan of Arc, because that was the only one I knew, and I considered her to be brave and strong. I would pick flowers from the fields and place them at the foot of her statue. I also sang in the choir. I think I was a pretty fast voice at the time. But I couldn't take communion because I was not baptized. The mayor's daughter befriended me immediately. I was quite a novelty in that time. She looked me up and down, and said, I've never met a Jew before, but you don't look any different. I then became the town mascot. 3 weeks after my arrival, I received a locked package containing my winter clothes, books, favorite toys, and my beloved dog. There was a letter from the man who had brought me, in which he told me that my father could not fight because he had broken his arm, and that my parents had to go into hiding because conditions in Paris had become quite dangerous. I would not be afforded for a while, but he urged me to be brave and patient, and then I would get some news very soon. Well, needless to say, I was quite shocked and was very upset. As much as everyone tried to comfort me, even the redhead was nice to us. I felt so alone and deserted without my family. The only thought that I had was to hug my dog and imagine that my mom was holding me close. I could even smell the perfume of the dog. I realized that I would have to stay in Priever for a while, so I tried to adapt to the life. There's a little Paris City girl who became a real little peasant girl. I wore clogs. I learned to walk through the woods and pick mushrooms. I could pick a mean mushroom. I climbed up trees and picked cherries and apples. I learned to ride on my friend's bike. I played with snails and frogs. I learned to dance and went to church with the others. I prayed to God. I believed it was the same God, and asked Him to keep my parents and brothers safe. Luckily, my brother found out where I was and managed to visit me in Priever. He went through hell and fire, as he said, but he felt that he had to visit his little sister. As soon as the priest saw my brother, he told him that I should be baptized in order to keep me safe. When my brother told him that I was Jewish, and that my parents would want me to stay Jewish. My brother visited me 3 times during my stay, and the priest approached him each time with the same request. I really believe that he was determined to save my soul. I was enrolled in a secular school. It was one large classroom comprised of several grades. I was in the advanced grades, and the headmistress was my teacher. She loved me, because I was a very good student, and she was also very protective, as she knew my circumstances. One day, as I was sitting at my desk in the window, I noticed a number of men in the yard, dressed in dark clothing and carrying guns. My teacher ran out to speak to them. When she came back, I asked her who these men were. She replied, "Oh, they just spent a mind and changed the subject." Well, I did find out that she was one of the heads of the French resistance, which was quite prevalent in that area. Actually, most people in the village were involved in the resistance. We often heard American planes carrying supplies in the fields. a very close call one day. There was a village not too far from ours named Priever. This is documented in the history books, where a German officer had been killed by a resistance fighter. In retaliation, the Nazis shot all the men in the public square, gathered all the women in the church, and the women and the children in the church, and set it on fire. I don't think there were any survivors. That same regiment of Nazis was now marching toward Artan, and I guess they were so angry. Our resistance fighters went from door to door, told us to pack a bag and food, blankets, and head for the woods. And there they would try to protect us. We spent the night in the woods. In the morning, we were told that the Nazis had changed their course and were headed in another direction. Lucky once more. We also witnessed events that no children should ever see. We witnessed the execution of traitors. We knew that these would be held in the cemetery. We would climb up the wall, even though we were not allowed, and we would watch as they shot the traitors who had betrayed their own comrades to the Nazis. Every time one was shot, we would shout with joy. We even saw a farmer, one of the farmers in the area, ordered the execution of his own son who had betrayed his friend to the Nazis. Liberation finally came, and the whole village celebrated in the streets. I anxiously awaited news of my parents, expecting them to come to me at any time. A couple of months later, my brother arrived. He couldn't get away sooner because after liberation he had been put in charge of a German prison camp. In his charge were many Nazi officers, and though he said he never mistreated them, he told me one incident in which he told the officer to remove his beautiful little boots. My brother tried them on and said, "They fit perfectly. I will keep them, and I also want you to know that I am a Jew." What sweet justice that was. He has his own interesting story to tell. Upon his arrival, my brother sat me down and told me the sad news. My parents were never in hiding. They were arrested 2 weeks after I left Paris. Were taken to the Hansi, the French internment camp, and 10 days later, sent to Auschwitz. After witnessing my emotional reaction, he told me that we were going back to Paris to stay with my one remaining aunt and uncle and twin cousins who had escaped by hiding in a convent. He told me that many people returning from the camps, they were called displaced persons or DPs, and that would not be lucky in common. So we went back to Paris and went to live with my aunt and uncle. Their apartment had not been taken. We, on the other hand, had lost everything. Our apartment and furnishings were all taken away, as well as my father's business. We had nothing left except for some money, some jewelry, and clothes that my parents had given our neighbors for safekeeping, and also a beautiful clock, which they obviously left for the neighbor, which my brother brought back to America, and which happily resides in my father's home now. It's a pleasure to look at it. It brings back some beautiful memories. We did recover one other precious item. We heard that all the pianos taken to the Jews were held in a warehouse as they had no time to ship it to Germany. If you could identify your piano with proof, you could get it back. My aunt and cousins and I proceeded to the warehouse. We looked around and saw hundreds of the most beautiful pianos. Some were very expensive, large brands, ornate, gilded. It was a dazzling sight. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted this small upright piano. I ran over to it, started to play, and screamed out, "This is my piano!" The man shouted, "Are you sure?" I said, I replied, I was quite sure, because this had the same chip by Reno, and it sounded just like mine. He asked me if I had any papers for proof. I then told him that they had taken everything from our home. How could I possibly prove it? I pointed out to him that I did not take out one of the expensive pianos. I just wanted what to do. Well, he finally believed me and said that I could have it. My cousins and I were thrilled. They had never played the piano before. But they started taking lessons, and it was quite evident that they had also inherited that wonderful musical talent. Every day, on my way to and from school, I would pass truckloads of DVDs returning from the cabin. I would run home in anticipation, hoping to find all my parents had returned. I even went to the famous Rothschild Cinema, which is that was the Levy Club, which was down the street from our apartment. And I would play the dog, begging for my parents' return. Unfortunately, my parents' night prayers were never answered. I had to resign myself to the fact that they had perished at Auschwitz. One day, my brother went to our old apartment building to find out if they were in the news. There was a telegram from my aunt and uncle in America who wanted to know who was alive. He immediately responded that he and I were alive and living in Paris. My uncle wrote and said that we were the first in line at the American consulate to try to get us a visa to the United States. Soon after, we started receiving packages filled with all the wonderful American goods that we were selecting. Since my aunt and uncle wanted us to come to the States, we had to make a decision. My relatives and friends were also more than happy to have us stay with them. Actually, my brother was already employed and self-sufficient. So my aunt and friends said that they would keep me and educate me, and that I would be their third daughter, and I know that she loved me very much. But when I felt that we belonged to my aunt in America, she had no children. I remember years back when she told my mother that she didn't have children. My mother replied, "My children are your children." Another prophecy that came true. My aunt had lost her entire family. We were the only ones left. So we decided that we would go to America. It took some months, but the papers finally came. I believe that I was given some priority because I was an orphan. I was to be examined by an American doctor who found me in perfect health. Then I was summoned to the American consulate, where I was interviewed at length by an important-looking official to examine my school papers, teacher recommendations, report cards, etc. And I remember he finally left his desk, came over to me, gave me a great big kiss on both cheeks, and said, "Rosette," and I'm proud to say, "Welcome to the United States of America. You may arrange passage whenever you wish." It was a different story with my brother. He had just done West Point, and the French government wanted him to serve in the French army. He argued that he had just served with the French forces of the resistance for the past few years. Well, it took another year for them to accept that as legitimate service. Well, I don't know if he still is, but he was receiving a pension from the French government for quite a few years. My brother took me to Laos, where I boarded a merchant marine ship. There were quite a few Jewish immigrants on board. I was the only orphan, so I was entrusted to the captain, who watched over me and made sure that I did not get seasick. It was a rough voyage, but every morning he would pick me up from the cabin that I shared with the other women, took me by the hand, and walked to death with me. He said that was the only way to fight seasickness. And he was right. I never got sick. All the other people did. We arrived in New York 2 weeks later. Passing the Statue of Liberty was quite a sight. After we docked at Alexander Flag, I saw Aunt and Uncle, who was screaming with joy. It was a very emotional moment. Let's begin my wonderful journey in America. It was April 19, 1946. I was 13 and a half years old. I had advanced as a little French girl with sad memories. I was now a budding American teenager. The first thing that my uncle did was to buy me a piano and arrange for me to take lessons. My aunt also found me an English tutor, a retired high school principal, who would come hearing my story without sharpness. After studying with him the whole summer, I entered Erasmus Hall High School in Brooklyn, and he was got an 8 in English. I made many friends, went to parties. David, much to my uncle's chagrin, as he was very protective. I attended Brooklyn College, married, and had a beautiful family, 2 sons and a daughter. I am now blessed with 6 fabulous grandchildren, as well as my husband Peter's large, wonderful family. My mother was right. My mother still prevails. I am here to relate my tale. I sometimes shiver at the thought that had I been in Paris another 2 weeks, I would have been arrested along with my parents. They saved my life. That is the reason that I became a docent and speaker at the Holocaust Museum in Southwest Florida, in Naples, where I live. Not only as a tribute to my parents, but also to educate people, especially young students, about the sad, the fascinating part of World War II history. This is especially important because they are the last generation who will see and hear a survivor who was a great witness to the horrors of the Holocaust. At this point, whenever I address groups of school children, I always like to leave them with this peaceful message. First, value your family. You don't realize how much they mean to you until they are no longer with you. Second, appreciate the wonderful freedoms that you have in this great country. Free of persecution, free to speak up for your rights and the rights of others. And third, as I gaze upon their beautiful multiracial faces, respect your differences as well as your cultural diversities. We are all different, color, religion, gender, but we are all of one race, and that is the glorious human race. I have devoted myself to promote tolerance and fight bigotry in any way that I can. If my story has touched your hearts, then I have accomplished my mission.